Emily, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can't see you currently.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's wrong with that.
Oh,
Hey, so yeah.
Oh, great. Hi. Okay. Should I go ahead and start
Yeah.
or?
Okay. Please.
Thanks very much for joining us. I know it's a different time where you are.
Yes, it's a little early, but I was excited to be here. So let me see. I'm trying to get it to share my screen.
No, okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay, great. Can y'all see that? Oh.
I'll just share it. Yeah.
Where are you speaking from in the States, Emily?
I am currently in North Carolina at my parents' house. It's the Thanksgiving holidays this week here in the U.S. So I'm home for that. I'm not sure if my screen share is visible. Having some.
No.
Okay.
No. Okay.
Did that work?
Not yet. Just bear with us. Should be. No.
Oh, it keeps quitting.
There we go.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you seeing it in there? No.
What is happening?
We're able to see it, I think, as
you
organisers,
can
but
see it?
at the moment, yeah, but at the moment, I don't think our attendees. Oh, we've got, so I can see it, but it's only on the last slide.
On the last slide?
Yeah, wait a moment. That's it. That should be it now. Okay. Oh, yep. I think that's it now.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Yes. Lots of thank you, everybody. You're so incredibly patient.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
And thank you to my previous presenters. The subjects are very aligned. So some of what you hear might be a little redundant, but it was very eloquently put. So thank you for prefacing. It was great. So my name is Emily Bailey. I'm a second-year PhD student at the Teachers College of Columbia University in New York. I'm studying education and anthropology. My current research now focuses on the intersection of autism and work or labor in France specifically, but that's not what I'm talking about today. This research was conducted for my MSc in social anthropology at the University of Edinburgh during the summer of 2020. And it's entitled Autism, Aliens, and Astrophysicists, the Image of the Non-Social Autistic in Popular Media. Okay, so to start, as I'm sure you all know, deficits in sociality, quote deficits, as compared to neurotypical sociality, have been pathologized by the autism diagnosis from its very inception. Beginning with Leo Kanner in 1947, who is attributed, aside from Hans Asperger, as being the first person to sort of describe autism. The phrase he used was extreme autistic aloneness, and he framed it as a quintessential marker of what we now understand to be autism. However, as the previous presenters mentioned, there is a large and increasing collection of evidence, both from academic and from non-academic firsthand testimonies of autistic people, that autistic people are not inherently non-social, but differently social in ways that are often ineligible to neurotypicals, but no less legitimate. So my interest in the following research was sparked by this discrepancy between the diagnostic criteria that's used to kind of create autism, which situates non-sociality as characteristic of the condition, and the stated lived experiences of autistic people themselves. And with this research, I argue that certain media portrayals and tropes of autistic characteristics contribute to the continued devaluation of autistic sociality and subsequently make neurotypical clinicians, parents, and other professionals blind to the way autistic people are and want to be social. So this, as I mentioned, sparked or resulted in a focus on popular media, specifically a series of television shows, a couple movies, primarily from the sort of American entertainment industrial complex, if you will. Because of its widespread accessibility and use, neurotypicals are most often exposed to autism and other disability in general through television and movies rather than through scientific literature. However, the ways that in which autism is portrayed in these forms of media is often simplified and exclude large subsets of the autistic population. This has resulted in, quote, stereotypes so durable and pervasive that they have become mainstream society's perception of autistic people and effectively overshadow autistic people's understandings of themselves. Based on the claim that media has an incredibly powerful role in constructing mainstream images and ideas of autism, I wanted to zoom in specifically on autistic sociality and investigate how depictions of this particular aspect of autism might serve to perpetuate the delegitimization of autistic sociality. So this research looks exclusively at characters that are heavily coded as autistic but are never canonically labeled as such. And this was a deliberate decision. My reasoning for this is rooted in Ian Hacking's discussion of labeling theory and Ray McDermott's discussion of the way one is acquired by a disability label. These scholars both argue that people organize themselves around individuals in specific ways following the imposition of a label like autism spectrum disorder, which limit potential ways of being by reproducing expectations dictated by this label. Whether organizing around a real or imagined person, writers, directors, producers, and actors will organize themselves around what they believe autism to be, behaving, portraying, and interacting with autistic characters accordingly. However, autistic people will have many social interactions with neurotypicals throughout their lives that are not dictated by this label due to the invisible nature of autism. Non-normative sociality is stigmatized and rejected regardless of disclosure status of one's diagnosis. Therefore, I was most interested in the implicit stories we tell about sociality, the behaviors and ways of being that are recognizably autistic and simultaneously situated as bizarre, funny, annoying, and or in need of correcting, according to these portrayals. The way these characters are portrayed reflects a point of reference for how non-normative sociality ought to be interpreted in neurotypicals' daily lives. So this led me to perform analysis of several popular TV shows that appeared to produce three specific tropes or common depictions of autistic sociality in television shows with characters who are coded as autistic. So the first one I'll talk about is framing autistic sociality as non-human. Then I'll speak about using, I think I missed the slide. Oh, no, I didn't. Situating the transition of neurotypical sociality as character development, which I've also called autism baiting, and portraying autistic sociality as a puzzle to be solved. And this is not an exhaustive list, but I had a word limit on my dissertation, so and a time limit, so I didn't go all in. I think there's a lot more research to be done in this area for sure. So the first trope that I'll talk about is framing autistic sociality as non-human. So autism and autistic characteristics have been equated to non-humanness for hundreds of years. Beginning with European folk beliefs about changelings, we can pull the thread of autism through to modern day discussions about aliens, both in media and in colloquial discussion. And it's important to note that both parents and autistic people themselves use this metaphor of the alien. Temple Grandin very famously called herself an anthropologist on Mars, but I'm specifically going to speak on the neurotypical parent using this metaphor. Parents evoke the image of the extraterrestrial when lamenting their challenges connecting with their autistic child. They note that the child is so far removed from their previously conceived notions of how a person should behave, they can only be described as non-human. In this context, the alienness of the autistic individual is referenced within the frame of kinship, specifically the perceived subversion of reciprocity, which underpins many arguments about Euro-American kinship norms, and also autistic children's failure to meet expectations parents have of the way neurotypical parents have of the way their children participate in kinship bonds in a normal and legible way. We see the example I pulled about this is from season 2, episode 10 of Star Trek, the original series, which the episode centers on a famously autistic-like character, Mr. Spock. Spock is half Vulcan, a species of humanoid aliens who shun emotion in favor of pure logic. Throughout the show, Spock demonstrates highly literal and rigid patterns of thought and often accidentally insults other crew members of the Enterprise through his tactless approaches to complex social situations. His humanity is frequently questioned and critiqued by human members of the crew, but his alienness is most potently represented through an interaction with his mother. In the episode in question, Captain Kirk is stabbed and left unable to command the Enterprise. Mr. Spock takes over the post in his absence. Simultaneously, Spock's Vulcan father is injured and requires a blood transfusion that only Spock can provide. His human mother comes to the Enterprise and begs Spock to accompany her to his father's side in order to save his life, but Spock refuses to abandon his post. At the height of their debate, his mother remarks, quote, "Inside, the human part of you was crying, and I cried too. There must be some part of me in you, some part I can still reach," unquote. Here, Spock's mother rejects his non-sociality in the form of his rigid behavior, logical thinking, and apparent emotionlessness, specifically as non-human. She claims that this part of Spock is not part of her, implying that a human child, a child that actually belonged to her, would willingly participate in the prescribed kinship structure by saving his father. Spock's refusal to fulfill his obligation to his mother in the form of reciprocal care is attributed directly to his Vulcan heritage, his non-human heritage, and by default, his autisticness. Ultimately, Spock does go with his mother to save his father, successfully performing humanness by conforming to kinship expectations of reciprocal care. The second is situating the transition of neurotypical sociality as character development, or autism baiting. So though the alien and other non-human metaphors for autism remain prevalent in popular media, the trope of the quirky autistic character or autistic coded character has also permeated other genres in recent years, most notably 30-minute sitcom shows. These narratives similarly contribute to the non-social narrative, often through autism baiting. And this term has been used by autistic creators online, so it's not mine, in blogs, but it's derived from the term queerbaiting, which refers to television shows and movies that feature characters who possess all the characteristics of an autistic person in order to mimic diversity, but who the showrunners and actors refuse to canonically label as autistic so as to not make their mainstream audiences uncomfortable and not to limit what they can do with the character. Because as I mentioned, the label of autism creates certain expectations, at least in the lay person's mind. An excellent example of this is Sheldon Cooper from CBS's The Big Bang Theory, which is a show, if you haven't seen it, that centers on a group of scientists working at a university, and Sheldon is sort of the main character. Sheldon is portrayed by Jim Parsons. He's a highly intelligent theoretical physicist with an incredible memory. He does not understand sarcasm or metaphor. He's highly literal, exhibits ritualized behaviors, and often fails to empathize with his friends. He exhibits so many autistic characteristics that many autistic people note how much they identify with him. However, the version of autism the show presents is a highly sanitized one. Although he often hurts his friends' feelings, Sheldon never says or does anything so inappropriate that would result in the sort of radical othering that was spoken about earlier. His ritualized behaviors are cute, harmless, non-disruptive, and no one ever tries to ABA his way out of them. Most importantly, his aversion to in-person social interaction and physical touch is portrayed as a choice, which is ultimately abandoned when he meets and falls in love with Amy Farrah Fowler. This ultimately implies that he's perfectly capable of participating in neurotypical sociality, and denies the idea that Sheldon's sometimes abrasive behavior might stem from a fundamental difference in the social affordances he perceives or his possibilities for social coordination. The show therefore situates Sheldon within the realm of neurotypical social legibility. Though he may at first be resistant to it, he eventually resents to his friend's insistence that he participates correctly in sociality, quote, correctly. As he does so, some of his autistic characteristics disappear. Sheldon's girlfriend, Amy Farrah Fowler, experiences a similar transition in a much more dramatic way. In her first several appearances on the show, Amy is similarly oblivious to social cues, metaphors, and sarcasm. She asks blunt and inappropriate questions, displays very few facial expressions, but can espouse obscure facts off the top of her head. However, as she develops her romantic relationship with Sheldon and her friendships with Bernadette and Penny, her autistic-like traits melt away until she is coded as almost entirely neurotypical by the end of the series. The difference between season 3 Amy, which is the first clip that I won't show you, but it's stark, and season 12 Amy is very significant. The way she speaks, emotes, and even dresses is markedly different, and most importantly, bears much more resemblance to what neurotypicals understand as appropriate behavior for an adult woman. The show frames Amy and Sheldon's transformation from autistic to neurotypical through their learned participation in neurotypical sociality as character development. As they become more legible to the neurotypical social fold, they become better, more mature, more likable, more fulfilled. The implications of this narrative are twofold. First, it situates non-normative sociality as the dominant characteristic that makes an autistic person autistic, and implies that once neurotypical sociality is achieved, all other autistic characteristics will disappear. And second, but relatedly, the narrative implies that normality can be achieved through correct sociality, creating a character that's sort of autistic, but ultimately cannot be classified as such because of their ultimate rise to normative sociality. My argument here is not meant to claim that autistic people never change or grow or experience character development. Of course, autistic people are dynamic and fluid, and perfectly capable of learning new skills, just like the rest of the world. The criticism here comes from the apparent message that when an individual, that sociality is the thing, that correct sociality is the thing that can almost cure an autistic person. The final trope explored in this research is the portrayal of autistic sociality as a puzzle which must be solved and translated into neurotypical legibility in order to be legitimated. The puzzle piece has historically been used by parent organizations to represent autism, most notably Autism Speaks. The puzzle piece is used partly because there is no definitively known cause of ASD and because its manifestations are so diverse that it seems to entirely defy categorization. In conjunction with the popular savant trope, which attributes superhuman-like abilities to autistic characters, autism evokes a sense of awe and wonder in a world that values rationality above all else. Autistic advocates, however, argue that the puzzle piece implies that autistic people are incomplete, or that they must be solved somehow. This imagery is reproduced in characters like Abed Nadir from the show Community. Community, which ran from 2009 to 2014, is something of a cult classic. The show centers on members of a study group at a community college in Colorado. Danny Pudi plays Abed Nadir, a young man who often misses social cues, speaks quickly, and annoys his friends with constant reference to his specialized interests, movies, and pop culture. In addition, Abed frequently has a difficult time communicating his emotions in a way that is easily legible to his neurotypical peers. This is most vividly portrayed in several episodes, which are told through Abed's unique point of view, which allow viewers to see the world how Abed sees it. For example, in one of the show's Christmas specials, Abed's estranged mother cancels their annual tradition of watching the claymation film Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. This emotional betrayal and sudden change of routine sends Abed spiraling. To deal with these challenging emotions, Abed creates a claymation world in his mind. His friends, who are concerned about his apparent delusion, take it upon themselves to try to figure out what he's trying to tell them. Although they successfully engage with Abed's method of communication, which is demonstrated by their own transformation into claymation characters, the ultimate goal is to bring Abed back to reality, and they do just that. As soon as his friends figure out why he's upset, Abed's claymation fantasy disappears. His sociality is successfully absorbed by the neurotypical fold. His tangible, unique impact on the world ceases to exist as soon as he becomes legible to his neurotypical peers, implying that Abed's sociality is only legitimate once it's been successfully translated. Through an anthropological analysis of various pieces of media, I have sought to lay the groundwork for thinking critically about what Euro-American societies who are heavily influenced by popular media consider to be sociality. Ultimately, I conclude that media portrayals of autism have immense power to shape the way Euro-American society views and understands autism. The most prominent examples, many of which were discussed here, reproduce potentially harmful assumptions about autistic people, which ultimately reinforce the idea that autism is the antithesis to sociality. This conclusion opens the door to deeper questions about the autistic experience in the neurotypical world. From it, we must begin to question the role the image of the non-social autistic and its perpetuation through media plays in autistic individuals' continued exclusion from society. However, it is also important to note that these characters and shows were chosen for analysis because autistic people chose them first. There are countless blogs, chat rooms, and YouTube videos made by autistic creators discussing how many of these autistic coded characters, for all their flaws, were the first and sometimes only characters on television they felt represented by. The value of that cannot be understated. I believe that these two realities, the potential harmful impact of existing portrayals of autistic sociality and the importance of these same characters for representation, can exist in tension together. We can appreciate what we have while advocating for something better. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily.